Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a run through of my Van Halen CD collection. So the band formed in 1972, though they didn't release a debut album until 78. Their final album was 2012. In all, 12 studio albums. Thing is, I've got 30 CDs in my Van Halen collection that I want to run through with you guys. And we've always got something, it seems like, going on with Van Halen. We got Sammy Hagar out on the road doing his own tribute tour. Van Halen has recently started digging into the archives and reissuing things. So I thought it'd be a great time to run through my CD collection. And we're going to get into that here with you in just a bit. But before we start, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like. All those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on really cool things like this with a run through of my Van Halen CD collection. So we're going all the way back to the beginning here. We're going back before the debut album. Now this is technically a bootleg here, but all studio recordings. And I'm talking about the original demos that were done. We've got the Gene Simmons demos from 1976, and then we've got the Warner Brothers demos from 1977. This is a 3 CD set. First disc are those Gene Simmons demos, of which we've got 10 of them. And then the second 2 discs are the Warner Brothers demos, and we've got a bunch more on there, but in all, we have 35 demos here for Van Halen before they started recording their debut. And there's a lot of cool stuff on here, some of which would later turn up on the final studio album, A Different Kind of Truth, with different lyrics, different, arrangements of the music. But there's actually quite a bit of stuff on here that has never seen the light of day. For me, at least, making this a much needed, warranted release from the band to have, and I wish they would go back and put this out maybe someday down the road. We will. Don't know why necessarily we've never seen this stuff otherwise, or except that I know Eddie Van Halen was very particular about what got released from the band, and so maybe feeling this stuff is in some ways subpar. It hasn't seen the light of day, but in my opinion, it is totally worthwhile. If you can track down either this collection here, which is titled Firestarter, there's other versions of this that are out there. But while I like the Gene Simmons demos in 76, I actually think it's the Warner Brothers demos, the 25 from them, that are most worthwhile. So if you've got a chance at picking up either or, I recommend the ones in 77 from Warner Brothers. Picking those up, this is a cool release in my opinion. And I think any Van Halen fan should have it personally. It's just that good of stuff. All right, so now we're going to get into the actual albums that the band has released, kicking off with Van Halen 1 in 78, an absolute iconic, genre-breaking, industry resetting album that it was. Eddie Van Halen doing Eruption, that song alone basically reinvented music at that point. Being on this album is absolutely iconic, but an absolutely fantastic album. I don't think anyone would question this as great of an album as it is. I sort of waffle between this and 84. Both of them huge albums for the band, but love those. So aside from that, and that being one of the Warner Brothers remasters, which the whole Warner Brothers remaster series of the Roth era are absolutely outstanding. But I started picking up these, which have recently started getting released. The original master recordings from MoFi. These are numbered, limited edition releases. This one here is number 450. The sound of these are much warmer. They're you can turn them up much louder and really listen to everything that is on these things. They do a great job with them. They're a little bit pricey. Usually get them for around 45 bucks, give or take. And it is a one disc, but you're paying for that special pressing of the original master recording, which is, not the remasters. It's not any of the other stuff, and it's as close as you'll ever get to the original tapes of this thing. So they've started doing this, and there's 4 of them that are out so far, this being the first one that I've got in the collection. Now, my favorite album is the 1979 Van Halen II album. I absolutely love this. Everything on this from start to finish is phenomenal. The first album I absolutely love, but most of those are worn out on the radio, so I tend to go for this album here. And I've got the original master recording version of this as well. Again, numbered limited edition. This is number 2466. I don't know what the total number is. I would venture a guess they might be about 10,000, but I could be wrong. There's the inside of that. Now, between the first one that I showed you, there's not a lot of difference between this and the Warner Brothers remaster. But between this one here and the Warner Brothers remaster, there is a lot of difference between these. This one here is so worth having in the collection, in my opinion. And I actually felt that about each one going forward. Maybe that first one, just not a lot to really do with it. But these versions here, it's like having an entirely new mix of the album. It's just very fresh, very spacious. There's a lot of room for the instruments to breathe. And like I said, you can really turn it up and it stays crystal clear all the way through. That's one of the things I really like about these original master recordings. And at least for a band like Van Halen, I'm willing to pick them up. I actually only have 6 total of those original master recordings, 4 of them with Van Halen, but the other 2 with Fleetwood Mac. But I am starting to see the power in them, and so I'll probably be picking up a few more, but I don't think it'll be something I would be picking up just for any band out there. It definitely has to be an album that I really love. All right, so we're moving on to the third Van Halen album, Women and Children First. This is, all of the original 6 Roth era albums are absolute classics, obviously. But I love this album here, 1980, and I picked up also, again, the original master recording, numbered. This is 1866, and we get, the gatefold that is in these. So this one, again, very different sounding. It's what I was saying before. It's warmer, more spacious. Instruments have a chance to breathe, all that sort of stuff. So these are really cool to have within the collection. Now, the next album, Fair Warning, in 1981, the 4th studio album, for whatever reason, this one never clicked with me. And I do have the Warner Brother remaster version of it. But I'll tell you what, when I got the original master recording of it, I finally saw the album in a new light. The mix of this and the sound of this, for whatever reason, clicks with me far more than this one does. And I find it to be really interesting, and that's one of the things I love about hearing these different mixes, the subtleties that are in them. So for whatever reason, my ears like this, and I'm now loving the album, whereas if you've seen my Van Halen album ranking, this one's pretty low in it because it had never clicked with me. But again, starting to see the power with this. This one here is number 2749 of the numbering that is on it. So we've got that. Now that's the last of the MoFi releases so far for CD. I believe that the LP versions of these, they might be a little further along. They're always ahead, it seems like, in the LP releases of those, but I am waiting for the next one, Diver Down, to be announced, which is the album that we're up to, 1982. Now, this one is a personal favorite, and I reach for this all the time and love it. And even though there's more cover songs on here, I think, than originals, they're really done very well. They're interpreted in the Van Halen style. And that was one of the cool things about the band. They were always able to take a cover and make it sound like their own, to the point that you don't really think of the original, you think of Van Halen. So in terms of Pretty Woman and Dancing in the Streets, I think Van Halen, even though obviously those are popular songs by other artists and many artists have covered them. But I think sort of the definitive iconic version, at least in my head, it's the ones that are off of here, Diver Down. So I've always really liked this album. I'm very much looking forward to the MoFi original master recording. But along the way, and this is just a recent purchase, I found this, an acetate, it's a CD, but it's from the original acetate of the record itself. It has an alternate mix and an alternate running order. So this is a bootleg CD edition made up to look like a Japanese release. It's very cool, very high quality, sounds fantastic. Paid a pretty penny for this. I want to say this was $75, but as much as I love the album, I was willing to do it to hear that alternate mix and alternate way that the album sequence was going to be. And I got to say, this one here definitely far superior, but it could have very well been this. And I'm one of those ones who loves to have the different version, the what if scenario. And I can listen to this and say, oh, geez, what if the sequence had been like this, right? So while I don't have that original master recording yet, I have been very much enjoying listening to this version of the album. And glad that I've got that. And with such little amount of Van Halen material out there, without getting into the differences of remasters and original master recordings and things like that, having only 12 studio albums, I will take some of these bootleg things because there's just no other way to get it. But, you know, if Van Halen starts releasing this stuff the way that they have with some of their deluxe editions that are coming down the road in this, CD collection that I'm talking to you about, I would totally go out and get them. So we're moving on to probably, I think this would be my first Van Halen album. 1984, I had this on cassette. Got it in the very late 80s, I want to say around 89, give or take. And absolutely, fell in love with this. And I've got the shirt. It was such an iconic album cover. I just remember seeing this everywhere in the 84, 85 year, give or take. And the music videos for this thing, it's just one of those albums. But the opening intro, the song 1984, that instrumental, I don't know, clicked with me. I love 80s era sounding music, and I've always thought that was absolutely fantastic. And it just was the perfect thing to kick off that album and get it going. Now, unfortunately, Roth leaves the band at that point, and we get Sammy Hagar coming in for 5150. This is 1986. And, I was a big fan of Sammy Hagar. I Can't Drive 55 off of VOA, going in and then doing this here. I thought was a perfect fit. Very different than Roth, but great for Van Halen. Love this album. It might be my favorite of all of the Sammy Hagar era albums, though. This one here, this is probably my second Van Halen album on cassette, because I love songs like Dreams, Love Walks In, and Why Can't This Be Love. I love those of the Sammy Hagar era, and having them all on one disc was really great. So up next, OU 812, 1988. I've always enjoyed this album, but nowhere near to the degree of the last album. I never liked the bonus cut, A Political Blues, that's on here. I feel like that should have just been left off. It doesn't sound anything like Van Halen. They totally did not make it sound their own in any way. So I've never enjoyed that, and it always kind of bugged me. And the other thing I think bugs me the most is that the songs that are on here are alphabetized, and it's not how it plays. So you go into it thinking Apolitical Blues is the first. It's not. I think it's the last track. But then When It's Love is down at the end. So anyways, that always bugged me about this whole thing. What are you going to do? All right, so the first one that I bought on CD, though, and new album that came out while I was getting into music was For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, that came out in 1991. Very much enjoyed this album. The song Top of the World is my favorite track off of here. I just love it. It kind of reminds me of the song Beautiful Girls. I just really like those really kind of big, over-the-top, bombastic sounding songs that have a definite sort of pop element to them, but still rock. So love, love, love that. And they would put out their first official live album with Sammy Hagar, which was simply called Right Here, Right Now. I was a little bummed when this came out at the time because it did so little Roth era material on it. We got Jump. We did get a cover song and Won't Get Fooled Again, which was not on an album, so that was kind of cool to get. Trying to see what else we have. We have, where is it? I'm sure Panama's on here somewhere. Yeah, there's Panama. So, and I think there's Ain't Talking About Love. So I think those were the three. And I love Ain't Talking About Love. That's probably my all-time favorite Van Halen song. So to get that, that was cool. But it just really needed to be mixed up more. I've always wanted to hear Sammy sing more of the Roth era stuff. And it would always bum me out that he never really did that sort of stuff. Still a great double live album, probably the best one that the band, put out. Now, the band has since reissued this, and I chose not to pick up the box set version. All I really wanted out of the box set was what they later released as a standalone CD, Live in Dallas 1991. And boy, am I glad I didn't pick up the box set. First, I picked up the LP from Record Store Day because I thought that might be the only way to get it. And then the CD. So if I had bought the box set, the LP, and the standalone CD, I'd have been pretty bummed about that. But all in all, I now have a standalone copy of this on Warner Records. Very cool that they're digging into the archives finally. 11 tracks. I think this was a club show too, so it's got a very different sound to it than this. The quality of this, nowhere near as good as this here. When I say quality, I just mean, I don't know whether this has been touched up or not. I mean, the quality, the sound is fine. It's just the band is very raw on this, whereas this one, the band sounds very pristine. But still very cool to get it. So glad to have that. That's all I really need, from that thing. And then we get Balance in 1995, and this was the tour that I saw Van Halen on. So this is also kind of my Van Halen, but nowhere near as good as For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, though I still like it. It definitely brought that whole alternative rock and less of the guitar solo and all that sort of stuff. Kind of came in on this. There's some weird stuff on here, some weird instrumentals and things. I love the album, but this is also where they started to make a few little missteps that would continue into the next album. But good stuff. And the band has reissued that one as well. Now, I didn't have to buy the box set because they did a 2-disc edition of it. And this one here having 3 rarities on here. We get Crossing Over, a killer B-side that I actually have the CD single for. Wasn't even thinking that I could have grabbed that and shown it to you guys as well, because I've had that since 1995 and absolutely loved it. So glad to see that it's popping up. It's the first track on the 2nd disc here. Then we get Humans Being from the Twister soundtrack. So that's on here, although that's on the Best Of album that they've got out. And then Respect the Wind, an instrumental that was also from the soundtrack. But then we get Live at Wembley Stadium included. And so Live at Wembley Stadium is now set for an LP release, Record Store Day, Black Friday, November 28th. I don't know whether we will see a standalone CD because we got a 2-disc edition of it like this, which I think was the intention, to maybe get more sales doing that. But I would love it if about a year from now they release the CD standalone. I would go ahead and buy it just to have it in its own album artwork. So I'm putting that out there in case Warner Brothers hears this. I know there are other fans out there that would do the same. There are plenty of people that aren't buying this because they don't want to rebuy the album, but I know there are plenty of fans that would buy the standalone live album. Now, I just mentioned this, Best of Van Halen Volume 1, and to date, we've never gotten Volume 2, although in the late 90s, it was earmarked to come out. It was on the books. It had a release date and everything. Kept getting pushed back, and then ultimately never happened. And I don't really know why or what is the story behind why Volume 2 never came out, and it bums me because this has all of the big hits, but there's so much more great stuff that would be worth coming out. Maybe they were looking to get a couple new recordings on it, and they couldn't really line up how to do that or who was going to do it, who was going to sing. I don't know. But this was such a cool thing because for a brief moment, Roth was back in the band and we had 2 new songs, Can't Get This Stuff No More and Me Wise Magic. Plus we got Humans Being on here from the Twister soundtrack. And that was the first time we could get it on a Van Halen release. So we basically had a new Sammy Hagar song and 2 new Roth era songs rounding this out. And it was very cool. But this does split from, it starts and it's chronological. So we get Roth into Sammy Hagar, finishing with Roth. And I would very much like if they would eventually do 2 separate best ofs, one of the Roth era, one of the Sammy Hagar era, which we still have not seen either. And I think those are missed opportunities too. But great best of album. I hope we see Volume 2 someday. So obviously the Roth era reunion is very, very short-lived, and we eventually get Van Halen III in 1998, and this brings in Gary Cherone, their third vocalist with the group in terms of recording-wise. And this album, I think, is way underrated. It is a very good album, but there are some big, big missteps on this, including Eddie Van Halen taking lead vocals. And I know Gary Cherone has said he pushed Eddie to sing it because it was a personal song, but it just doesn't sound very good. And it really throws everything off, in my opinion. So the other thing being, there's a number of songs on here which really sound like they're trying to recapture the old days, and you sort of get your version of this and your version of that, as opposed to them really sounding like they were breaking new ground. So it's a little bit one of those kind of things where you listen to it and it sort of sounds like rehashed material. And I think those are all reasons why the album gets ranked lowly and doesn't really get the love that it deserves. Still, Gary Cherone, a very underrated singer with Van Halen. And I loved that when Gary Cherone went out on the road with them for that, he sung all eras, and they finally put a lot of the Roth stuff back in. And I remember there being a radio show at the time, and I recorded it down to cassette, and I would later rip it to CD and listen to it and loved it. But I have finally found a really good quality live. It's a bootleg, 2 CD set with Gary Cherone singing, and you're getting all that great stuff. This is in Osaka in 1998, and kicks off with Unchained. Then it goes into Without You, which was a new song. We get Mean Street. We also get When It's Love. Why Can't This Be Love? Janie's Crying. I mean, Dance the Night Away. So much great stuff covering all the best eras. And so this is to me like a definitive live album because of what it covers, and really get the feel of the whole band through that. So now we would get a Sammy Hagar reunion. And again, this would be very brief. It would really only be a tour, but we did get Best of Both Worlds. And this was a 2 CD set covering much more stuff, and maybe why Volume 2 didn't happen as a single disc. Maybe they decided to turn it into this. Um, who really knows why? But it still doesn't break it down into disc 1 being Roth and disc 2 being Sammy Hagar. It's still all mixed up. But we got 3 brand new studio songs on here. It's About Time, Up for Breakfast, and Learning to See. Now, the problem is they open with Eruption, and then they go to these 3 new songs, which very much sound like the early 2000s and has a down-tuned guitar sound to it, not really the full-on Van Halen sound that we know. And then we get into all the other stuff, and I think I would have liked it better if they had not opened with Eruption and either mixed up the new songs throughout, put them at the end, or they needed to move Eruption and put the 3 new songs first. I don't know. But you sort of start in the 1970s, 78, and then you move to present day, and it's very jarring. Still, I do enjoy those 3 new songs. It was very cool at the time to get it. I love the cover on this thing, replicating Eddie's guitar. So that was very cool in and of itself. I'd love for the band someday to gather up all these one-off songs from the best ofs and the B-sides, things like that, and actually make an odds and sods kind of album. Again, because there's so little studio material, I think that would be a great thing. All right, and then we get the final studio album, A Different Kind of Truth, which I think was a killer return to form album. We get She's the Woman on here. It's got some different lyrics and stuff. Tattoo was also an old song. And when I'm saying She's the One, those are back before the band recorded their debut. Tattoo is another one of those. I forget what the original title of that was, but it got new lyrics. So a number of the songs on here, I want to say about half of these were original songs from back in the day before they got signed, and then the other half were newly written ones. But all in all, just sounding really great. This also came with a DVD in it, and it had the guy sitting down talking about everything. So this was a cool package and extra little thing to get. I love the album art. I love the classic Van Halen logo on it. I think if this, not if, but it is, the final Van Halen album, what a great way to go out on top. Now, we do know that Alex Van Halen has talked about there being some kind of final Van Halen album. We don't know whether it's going to actually be Eddie Van Halen, because he's talked about giving the riff ideas out to people to turn them into songs. And then, I don't know, are we going to bring Sammy Hagar and David Lee Roth in to sing or what? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, if anything ever, because it's just taking far too long, in my opinion, to actually get some unreleased material out from Eddie Van Halen, other than this deluxe edition stuff and live recordings and things like that. But an actual album worth of unreleased material, of which there's supposed to be tons and tons of stuff in the vault, we're not seeing yet. But while the band was still together, before they hung it up, we did get a Roth era live album, but it's a new Roth era live album. And yet, one of these days, I would love to get a classic live album from Roth back in the day. This here is still very good, surprisingly very good, because Roth's vocals were not what they once were by the time they had done the reunion tour. He more sort of spoke the lyrics than sang the lyrics. Though I gotta say, I did end up really enjoying this overall. And it's one of those ones where you gotta get into listening to it. And once you kind of get past that it isn't gonna be sounding like Roth back in the day, I ended up enjoying the live album very much. But I remember when I first heard the singles that they dropped from this, and it was kind of very jarring. But like I said, it grew on me. So a 2-disc live set of Roth era stuff that also included the final songs from the final album, Different Kind of Truth. So songs on there covering all the Roth era things. All right, and then outside of the most recent deluxe editions for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge and Balance, the latest thing so far is the box set, the remasters of the 4 Sammy Hagar era albums, for which this stuff here, in my opinion, sounds remixed. And I know that a lot of people will fight me on that. We get the albums themselves. They do not simply sound like remasters because, in particular, Michael Anthony's bass is moved way up front on it. And I'm hearing it in an entirely different way. It's not like the Roth albums that were just made brighter and crisper and all of that. In fact, I think some of this is muddier than the originals. I don't like the remasters, these remasters that are here. As I said, they sound like a remix to me. So I'm glad to have them because, again, it's that different sound. And when I want to hear it in a different way, I pull those out. What I did want the box set for was this, Studio Rarities. And this has 8 tracks on it. So they basically pulled off of the albums the ones that were bonus tracks or the ones that were not on the LP. So like Political Blues opens this. And then we get Bacalatherum. Don't know if I said that right, but that track was actually a bonus on Balance, wasn't on the LP, so that's on here. Crossing Over, the B-side's on here. Then Respect the Wind, the instrumental from Twister, Humans Being, the song from Twister, and then It's About Time, Up for Breakfast, and Learning to See from that Greatest Hits. So this is sort of the closest of a Studio Rarities thing. Problem is, they open with that horrible cover of Political Blues. After that, it's actually really great, but it's also been remastered and kind of has a bit of that weird sound. But I did get the disc that I wanted, that I was hoping for. But would love to see this done, released on its own, but fleshed out with some other unreleased material and stuff that didn't make albums, whether or not they're unreleased songs or alternate versions that just sound very different or who knows what. But there you go. So far, no individual releases of these, but maybe that's what the deluxe editions are for the fans. And there you go. 30 CDs from Van Halen. That is my collection. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Weigh in. Let me know what's your favorite Van Halen album and the favorite thing that you have in your collection from the band, especially if it's not one of their main albums. I've got all the other cool things. I mean, I love that Firestarter, that pre-Van Halen 1 demos album. There's some discs of that floating around. They call it Van Halen 0. So if you see that out there, that's what that is. That's a demos collection. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you real soon. Have a great one. Bye-bye.